A client deliverable is due Friday, and the project still exists as 3 notes, a half-built outline, and a feeling that one more work session will make it clear. That situation burns time twice. First while deciding what the project actually is, then again while repairing work that should never have entered scope. The intentional project planning system fixes the handoff between idea and execution with a one-page Boundary Baton Board. The practical output is not a prettier task list. It is a visible map showing the intended outcome, the edges of the project, the next batons of work, and the review point that will change the next similar decision. The diagnostic question is simple. What must be true for this project to be worth the next block of attention? Poor planning persists because the first draft of a project usually feels productive. A solo operator opens a document, lists tasks as they appear, and calls that momentum. The symptom is a messy schedule, but the cause is an undefined promise. If the outcome, exclusions, dependencies, and capacity limit are not visible, every new idea can pretend to be necessary. The common response is to work longer or make a bigger list. That fails because it treats overload as a memory problem rather than a decision problem. What is actually being lost is not only hours. It is the ability to protect the project from attractive side work, late discoveries, and vague standards for done. The Boundary Baton method has 4 movements, but it is not a generic loop. First, the project is bounded. Second, the work is converted into batons. Third, capacity decides what can move. Fourth, a review notch captures the drift before the next project repeats it. The board controls 5 decisions: what counts as success, what is deliberately excluded, what action moves next, what must wait because capacity is full, and what adjustment will be carried into the next similar plan. The mechanism works because attention is treated as a scarce handoff, not an endless container. A baton is small enough to be picked up, moved, and finished. A project stops being a cloud of intentions and becomes a chain of visible transfers. The first operating rule is the boundary rule. Before a task list exists, write the outcome and 2 edges. One edge names what the project must include. The other names what it will not include, even if it is useful. Use this rule when the project has a deadline, a client expectation, a launch date, or a meaningful opportunity cost. Do not overuse it for tiny reversible chores where the cost of planning exceeds the cost of doing. The rule works because scope creep usually enters through reasonable additions, not obvious distractions. It fails when the outcome is written as a mood, such as make it better, instead of an inspectable finish. The decision that changes is whether an attractive idea joins this project, waits for a later version, or is rejected. The second rule is the baton rule. No work enters execution unless it has one next physical action, one visible done signal, and one attention block no larger than 90 minutes. 90 minutes is a practical default, not a universal law. The point is to expose work that is secretly several decisions bundled together. Create the baton queue by taking each deliverable and asking, what is the next thing I could physically finish without redefining the project? A midpoint self-audit is useful here. If any active item cannot show its action, done signal, and attention block, it is still planning material, not execution work. The trade-off is precision versus spontaneity. The board may feel slower than jumping in, but it prevents a 6-hour mystery task from occupying the center of the week. Consider a solo educator launching a digital course with 4 weeks available and only 2 recording afternoons each week. The initial idea includes lessons, worksheets, a sales page, bonuses, and community setup. On the Boundary Baton Board, the outcome becomes a paid course with a clear curriculum, a checkout path, and the first cohort email ready. The boundary excludes bonus material and a community area. The baton queue begins with one finished curriculum outline, then one recorded module, then one edited module, then one checkout test. The decision is to launch a lean version instead of protecting every imagined feature. The action is to schedule only batons that fit the recording constraint. The trade-off is fewer extras in exchange for a coherent launch. The inspectable result is a board where every active baton has a done signal, and the review notch records that editing took longer than recording, changing the next course plan. Capacity is where intentional planning becomes uncomfortable. The capacity row is a narrow lane under the baton queue. Only the batons that can be completed with available attention, tools, and waiting time are allowed into that lane. This rule works because solo operators often plan from ambition and execute from fatigue, interruptions, and real dependencies. It fails when every estimate is treated as a promise instead of a guess to be tested. The decision that changes is not how hard to work. It is which baton deserves the next protected block and which one must wait. The meaningful trade-off is scope versus reliability. A wider project can feel more impressive, but if the capacity row is overloaded, the plan is only hiding delay in a more organized shape. A consultant rebuilding a personal brand website has 2 weekends, client work during the week, and delayed photography. The first plan is a full site with case studies, articles, services, and a media page. The boundary rule cuts the scope to a one-page site that states the offer, shows proof, and gives one contact path. The Baton rule turns the build into small moves. Draft the page structure, choose 3 proof points, build the hero section, connect the contact form, test on a phone. The plan fails on Saturday morning when the photos do not arrive. Instead of redesigning everything, the capacity row moves a placeholder visual baton forward and parks the custom photo section outside the boundary. The output is a working one-page site without final imagery. At review, the learning loop changes the next website project. Asset collection becomes the first dependency, not a design detail. The most common misuse is turning the board into a decorative planning ritual. If the boundary rails are vague, the board will approve almost anything. If the batons are too large, execution will still stall. If the capacity row is ignored, the plan becomes a wish list with better spacing. The response is not to rebuild the whole system, tighten the failing component, rewrite the outcome until it can be inspected. Split any baton that cannot be finished in one attention block. Move excess work out of the capacity row without guilt. Also separate reversible choices from high consequence ones. Button color and file naming can move fast. Client promises, launch scope, pricing structure, and deadline commitments deserve a slower pass through the board. Return to the Friday deliverable and the diagnostic question: what must be true for this project to be worth the next block of attention? The answer should now be visible, not carried in your head. First, define the outcome and the 2 edges before listing tasks. Second, split work until each baton has an action, a done signal, and a small enough attention block. Third, let the capacity row reject work that ambition would accept. Fourth, use the review notch to record the drift that actually happened, then change the next similar plan. This does not remove uncertainty or interruption. It gives them a place to show up before they consume the whole project. The transformation is observable. Fewer vague starts, fewer hidden additions, clearer next moves, and a project that can be paused and resumed without being reinvented.